Welcome to the live. Lots of people here joining already, so it's great to be back. Those observant of you will notice that I have a slightly different venue background. This is actually my sort of studio, as it were, rather than my study. Now, if you were with me when I first started doing live streams back during the pandemic, I used to do them in here. In fact, this whole structure behind me with all the ships and all that is actually something I created to do the live streams in a different venue. Then the Wi-Fi wasn't so good, so I moved into study. Anyway, we're back trying it out here. Hopefully I fixed the challenges that I did have with the Wi-Fi then. So let's get into a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces and then get stuck into the questions. So for the next 60 minutes, of course, I will try and answer as many questions as I possibly can. So I'm back from Crystal Cruises. I'm Gary Bembridge, of course, channel's Tips for Travelers. And if you have a question, please write the word question beforehand so that I can make sure that I am seeing it as a question rather than a chat. And what else can I tell you? If you're watching this afterwards, by the way, this is a live stream. So you're going to only hear the stuff that I've done to answer questions. I just want to check that it's all running smoothly because I can see on my iPad, I'm just seeing a blank screen. So hopefully you're actually, oh, there we are. It's popped up. So you are able to see me. So that's good. So welcome to everybody. Let's get stuck into the questions. Obviously, I'm back from Crystal and I'll touch on those questions first. And I will come back and talk about some of the other questions shortly as well. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. So hopefully I don't leave out any of the questions that come up. So someone had asked sort of an overarching question, which was an overall, here we go. Sign Vault Madchen, how would you compare Crystal Symphony's facility with other competing ships? And I think the Burke boys had asked a similar question or along the same lines. Now you've experienced the new Crystal, where do you now feel they rank among the ultra luxury competition? I'd also love to hear this answer after your time in Explorer, because Explorer is my next trip. So basically, to sort of summarize it, I absolutely loved my time on Crystal Cruises. Now, I'd been on Crystal way back in, when was I there? I was way back in 2013 or something like that. So a very long time ago. So this was quite a big sort of change. Obviously, it's been relaunched and restaged, but I absolutely thought it was fantastic. I thought the ships are obviously old ships, but they've been redecorated and redone very nicely indeed. I was really impressed with the ships. They have obviously reduced capacity, and they've done that to make the cabins bigger, basically, because the challenge I think they had versus the competition, come back to the question around the facilities, is their cabins, generally speaking, were kind of smaller. So that was a challenge. So they've reduced capacity so they can make the cabins bigger. It does mean you have a slight hodgepodge of cabins. So I was actually fortunate enough to be upgraded. I'd booked an Aquamarine and I was upgraded to Sapphire, which is a bigger cabin. So they have more of a suite thing because you have a seating area and you have the other area. And that was a beautiful cabin. But there are three different types of that. You've got some that date back to 2017. You've got some which are a little bit more called classic, and then you have the more modern ones. So so there's a little bit of a hodgepodge of cabins, but they definitely made the cabins bigger. So that's probably one challenge they've got, particularly when you've got the more entry-level cabins, the solo cabins, which are really good, but they're pretty small. The doubles, I think they're called. So some of them are a little bit smaller. So that's where they probably fall down. So I think that's why they're quite keen, of course, with getting the bigger, the newer ships coming in the next couple of years. But the decor is beautiful. The ship is beautifully maintained wherever you look. It's really fantastic. The food is absolutely outstanding. I would actually say of all of the ultra luxury lines I've been on, which is Regent, I've been on a couple of times, Silversea, I've been on a couple of times, and so on. I would say they had the best food. I think the food was absolutely magnificent. In the main dining room, the waterside, it was really good. They obviously have the Nobu, which is fantastic. But even in the buffet there for breakfast and lunch is really good food, not massive choice. I was less keen on the Italian restaurant. I actually got to go there twice. I thought it was fine. It was probably the weaker of the restaurants, but the food is absolutely fantastic. Service is phenomenal. And one of the things that they have, which will be interesting looking forward, and I do think this is where it compares to the other lines, is most of the people that you meet on Crystal have been on Crystal for decades. I mean, the hotel director has been there for 30 years. Obviously, during the pandemic and when it went bust, they left. But they tell me, pretty much everybody asked, they reckon that 80% of the crew and the senior management came back, and it shows. You meet people who've worked on Crystal forever. They know the product, they know what they're doing. The service is phenomenal. So they really shine in that regard. The other area where I think they were extremely strong, and I do think they're the best of all of the ultra luxury, is in the enrichment area. In some ways, they're almost a little bit old school in a way, because they keep all the things that sort of have been dropped by others. So they had 3 speakers. What I liked is they were largely focused on the destination. One speaker was a little bit more general, but they were very focused on the destination, really in-depth stuff from the destination. They had, they then had cyber classes. They had 2 different cyber speakers, one that would do stuff around some of the basics stuff, you know, what is AI and how to use AI. Another would be very practical around photography. So we talk about how you take good iPhone, mobile phone pictures and so on. They then had a golf pro. I believe on some trips they have more than one golf pro, but they had a golf pro on, which would run classes and also, arranged for people to play golf. They had cooking classes. They had an artists program on board. So it was just like so much enrichment. Their dance class people on and so on. So I thought they were very, very strong in that regard. So I thought it was fantastic, so much so that I've actually have booked another trip when I was on board to go on the other ship, the Serenity, which I have been on way back and I can't really remember. So I was very, very impressed. Now, where do they stack up? In reality, you know, when you come to this level, that you're slightly splitting hairs in terms of where they, you know, which is better and which isn't better. So obviously, one of the downsides, which I think they'll address over time with Crystal, is because they only have the 2 ships. They have relatively limited itineraries. Now, the ships sort of tend to keep traveling, keep on the move. So you can actually do sort of back-to-backs without repeating an itinerary. But they're obviously much more limited. So even when I was looking ahead, wanted to try the other ship, you know, there was kind of fairly limited in terms of where where you could go, where you couldn't go, and that sort of stuff. So I think that's probably a negative, which will be addressed over time. But certainly, I mean, there's lots of loyal Crystal people that I met who certainly were on loads of times, and they certainly weren't struggling to find ways to go. So let me think what else was, no, someone asked the question, which was, I actually really like this. And someone asked it almost, I think, probably as a negative, but I think it's actually a positive. And I'm going to tell you why. So Warren was saying they're on Crystal Symphony, which fantastic, it's a great ship, on New Year's Eve in the harbor, which would be amazing. Are excursions still not included? How many shipboard credits did you get? So excursions are not included. And I actually really, 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 really like not having excursions included. Now, obviously, I liked, you know, Regent and Silversea, they're having in them included, Seabourn don't. I really liked the fact that I could choose excursions, and I didn't feel that I'd paid for excursions that I needed to go on them. So certainly we weren't in many duplicate ports that I'd been on before on other lines, but I had been on Regent, and we went to Nagasaki, for example, and Busan. And definitely the excursion options in those ports were way better on Crystal than they were on the included excursions on Regent. So the excursions weren't crazy prices. Some of them were crazy prices, some of them were quite expensive, but I think their connection with Abercrombie and Kent shows. Now, I might be looking a bit through rose-tinted glasses, as it were, but I thought the excursions were fantastic. What I also really liked is they had port briefings. Now, these were on the television, although they stopped doing them towards the end, which I went to query about, and they were doing them busy for the next cruise, which I thought they banded us a bit. But they had some really good port immersions, which would tell you about, you know, in all ports where you couldn't walk off and get into town, they had shuttle bus. In some places, they would have like 2 shuttle buses, one going to the station so you could go further afield, one going into town. So I really liked that fact. So actually, I loved, now this is maybe also me because I like to do more self-touring. So I loved the fact that I could, you know, choose excursions really good, and I could invest the money where I wanted them to. The other thing which was less good is, and it's a small thing, is they have much lower onboard booking discounts. So on Silversea, for example, I think I got 5%. On Crystal, it's 2.5%. but they did run some very good promotions where I could book an aquamarine and get upgraded to sapphire and stuff like that. So that was perhaps less good. So let me see if I'm answering other specific questions. Kelly's here. Great to see you, Kelly, from Hawaii, up really early. I met Kelly and her partner Carl. We had a great dinner, and it was great to catch up with them. So let me see if there's other specific questions. Oh, sorry. Someone asked about, I got no onboard credit and I didn't get any onboard credit for my next one, although they were doing a promotion on board where I got either a $1,000 credit, no, $250 credit or a night stay before the cruise in Lisbon. So I didn't get any onboard credit stuff. And someone had asked the question around, they're going to be on Crystal Cruise in early October. Are there any key pre-cruise activities you recommend? Are there any key dates to plan with respect to dining excursions? So in terms of dining, I would go in as soon as you can and tie up your dining because you're only allowed, unless you're in the upper suites, you can only go to each of the especially the restaurants. So you can go to the Nobu, the Uma, and the Odivia, the Italian, once, unless you're in a higher grade. If you're in a 10-day or shorter cruise, Beef Bar you can go to as often as you like. You have to make reservations. So I would get in there early, particularly if you have a particular time that you want to go. Now, if you want to go a second time to either the once you've used your 2 slots, if you want to go to either the Nobu or the Italian, you have to pay $50 to go a second time. But actually, the ship wasn't sailing completely full, and I think Crystal generally is not sailing completely full. Like I got an upgrade, quite a few other people got upgrades. They're doing that upgrade promotion because they're still kind of getting into their stride, I guess. But I would go in as early as you can to lock down dining. So I did that. I went and I locked down dining because I like to dine early. But certainly when it comes to the main restaurant, no issue if you want table for 2, whatever, anytime, that's fine. Beef Bar, you can only reserve once you're on, no, you can reserve it online, but once you're on board, if you want to go more times, I would go as soon as you can. In terms of excursions, what I also really liked, although excursions are not included, you don't have to pay until you're on board. So they charge you once you're on board. You have a 48-hour cancellation time period. So I tied up actually quite a lot of excursions, and then I undid them as I could have thought more about the ports and stuff. But I would try and book those excursions fairly early in case they do get sold out. So if there's any ones that you really, really, really want to do. So for example, I was toying, we went to Shanghai sort of early evening, sort of like 7 o'clock at night. You have to go through immigration. And then they were doing a night tour. And I did it about, should I do the night tour? Shouldn't I do the night tour? And I did it too long. And by the time it was then fully booked, but they put on a waiting list. It then got released, and then I actually decided not to do it because I was doing a full day excursion the next day. So I would just, anyone you want, I would lock up, bearing in mind that you can cancel within 48 hours. For the first tour, it's that day when you get on board. So it's a pretty good, cancellation policy. Let me just check if there's any more Crystal questions because I've been talking for a while. As Boca Boy said, my next trip is Explorer. I'm really interested to see where they rank because I think, based on what they said last time, is they see Explorer being more like an Oceania kind of competitor than the ultra luxury. Sarah, travel agent, Sarah's here. Oh, Silver Cruise in Botswana safari, very nice. Sarah, also Tanzania is a fabulous safari, and Sarah's actually been trying out Crystal, which is great. So let's have a look at any other Crystal questions, and I will come back and touch on other questions. I will come back. I'm considering a celebrity cruise. Oh, sorry, I thought it was a Crystal question. From Phuket to Malaysia, Singapore, ending in Bali. Are there many sites at these ports? Are they far from the ports? Diana, without knowing the specific itineraries you're calling on, but many of those ports in the itinerary, particularly when you're talking about if you're going to Bangkok, Vietnam, etc., the ports are quite far from the destination. So it's a pretty good idea to check and book excursions there. Let's have a quick look if there's any more Crystal questions, and I'll come back and I will do the other questions. Francis, have you saw the question that doesn't include Seabourn? Don't include excursions either. So it's only Silversea and Silversea and Regent that currently include excursions. And I've also mentioned a little bit in my Regent video that recently is, I sort of some ways wish they would unravel themselves from that option, because I'm not sure that the excursions are as great. So let's have a look. Any other quick questions? And I will then come back and go through the other questions. Let's have a look. Let's go back. Let's go back and go through questions as they come up. This is a good old mishmash of questions. I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. So John is sailing on Oceania Vista in June. Final 2 stops are Skagen. I've never been to Skagen, so I can't help you there. And overnight in Oslo. So in Oslo, there are some fantastic things to do. I actually quite enjoyed going on the hop on hop off bus. It goes to some amazing stops. You go to, like, you know, where the Royal Palace parties. You go to Maritime Museum. But there's also some quite good excursions out into some sort of, I can't remember the name of it because I'm actually doing it on, I think I'm doing it in Paul and Carol's group cruise. I think we go to Oslo, if I remember correctly. And they have some which go out to some of the stately home stuff. So I would have a look at those. Jeff is here, which is great to see. Let's have a look. Linnea's here. Mooman 547 is here. Great. I guess you're still not back in the Seattle part. Hope all that's going well there. Anne LGS, what do you recommend on when to book? Last minute or weeks out versus many months or a year in advance as related to cost, availability, excursions, cabin location? So Anne, my personal recommendation is to book as far in advance as you possibly can for a couple of reasons. First of all, most cruise lines are sailing at full capacity or higher. Now, once you get into ultra luxury, it tends to be less so. But, you know, if you look at all of the results that come from the major groups, Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Norwegian, in fact, it was just Norwegian came out, on average, they're selling at 104% across their entire capacity, and Royal Caribbean is even higher. So ships are generally selling full. So the prices are generally cheapest when they launch. So I'm doing many things where I'll book when itineraries launch, because you like to get the cheapest price and the best offers. I gave it a good example. One of the most dramatic is Ponant when they launched their Antarctic to the Ross Sea. They were selling it 30% off with no solar supplement for a very short period of time. Generally speaking, now prices are going up and up and up. So I was looking perhaps at doing something in June this year, and I can see the prices are way above if I'd booked them in advance. Obviously, if like me, you're very obsessed about cabin, then you're going to get the best choice of cabin. So I was looking even at some stuff that's even 6-9 months out, and the cabin choice is very limited. The best cabins have kind of gone. So that's really important. Obviously, again, excursions, the sooner you book, the more you can get into booking excursions, particularly because you know, ships are selling so full, there could be a challenge on excursions. So I would, you know, go as early as you possibly can. There are way fewer last minute deals than there have been, generally speaking. But of course, you know, you can still sometimes get them. What if you are a last minute person, you want to book last minute? What I always say to people is follow all of the main lines that you like on social media and interact a little bit, because you will then get the ads when they bring any promotions up, like flash sales are quite popular. You'll see that run a 48-hour sale on a weekend, particularly at the end of a quarter, or around some events, you know, Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or whatever. You can sometimes pick up some good offers there, like, you know, second person 70% off, stuff like that. So do that, and also sign up for their email newsletters, because that's where you'll get last minute stuff from. So Kelly slightly disagreed with me on the thing. So wasn't thrilled with the excursions on Symphony. Seemed like a bus time and hard to guide, no AudioVox like River Cruises has. I did like the comedy shuttles. So it's interesting because we had AudioVox on my Shanghai one, but you're right, it was a little bit more mixed in terms of the quiet voxing. So they did have that capacity. So both my Busan excursion and my Shanghai one, both they used the AudioVox system. So that was quite good because you could wander off and still hear. But you're right, there were quite a lot of more panoramic ones, I guess, as well. That may also be a function of the clientele stuff. And maybe because I do like to self-explore, maybe I was probably less focused on that, and I did end up picking a few, and you're right, I did drop a few from that. So I think that is a good watch out. So I will actually look at them more in more detail. Just to remind, write the word question so I don't miss the question. So sales RPG, do shows on Carnival ships need to be booked when on the ship? Now, I'm not sure on the big new ones, but generally speaking, you don't have to. The main ones that you have to book on are MSC and Norwegian, you normally have to book. Certainly, and then maybe on the big new ships you have to book. So if anyone knows the answer to on the big ships, but normally you don't need to book for the general shows. But if I'm wrong on that, because I haven't been on like the Mardi Gras class, if you have to book, then let me know. Diabetic. Do you have any special tricks to reducing jet lag after or during all your travels? Now, I get asked this a couple of times because I'm relatively fortunate that I don't really suffer from jet lag. And I think it's probably because I maybe trained myself through all my years of, about 15, 20 years of corporate travel, where I was traveling a lot, long haul, and you kind of just couldn't let jet lag get you down. So I will say, though, that one of the advantages that I am always will, if I possibly can, like 99% of the time, I will always try and travel business. So I collect air miles or Avios as I do. Like I will only fly one world airlines. So and I have a credit card, so I put everything on there. So I get miles. So I always try and use miles, so I can then go business, because that helps, because you can lie down and sleep. I'm very fortunate because I can sleep on planes. So actually coming back, for example, from Hong Kong overnight on Friday, it's a 15-hour flight. I slept for nearly 9 hours, and obviously wake up and all that sort of stuff. And heading to Japan, I slept for 7 hours. So I get in the zone. So the minute I get on board the plane or whatever, I move it into local time. So when I was flying back, for example, from Hong Kong overnight on Saturday, I put it straight onto UK time. So I knew it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it was. So I get into that sort of zone. I also don't drink alcohol, and I didn't used to drink alcohol when I was on a plane, because I always read that does get you kind of dehydrated, and that doesn't help with that. What I also try and do is exercise. So normally I will, when I ever get to a place, I'll either go out and walk, or I'll go to the gym and do exercise. I found that really helps a lot. I also use, although I know a lot of people poo-poo it and don't like it, and some controversy, I will use melatonin, maybe the first night or the second night, which is sort of gets you into the zone, as it were. But I basically try and work on that time, on local time. So I won't nap, for example. Like Mark, when I travel with Mark, would always want to sort of nap if we go somewhere, and I won't. I'll only go to bed at that particular time. Jerry asking the question, talking about Mark, when will Mark be joining me live? So Mark is starting to join on my patron and channel member lives. So he's going to be doing those as sort of like, that's when he's going to come on to those. So I found that that probably works best. So we'll see how that goes through this year, and then we may change that. But certainly if I'm on a trip with Mark, then he's more likely to join me. But for general ones, I do it on my patron and member ones. But if we're on a trip together, we will normally join me, like we did when we were on Regent, for example. Now, the next trip I do with Mark is not for some time. In fact, my next cruise with Mark is quite towards the end of the year, but we're doing some land-based stuff before that. PPPJ, this is an interesting one. When more and more ports limit or even stop cruise ships from visits, do you think or have heard of any cruise to nowhere like they were just after COVID? So I haven't really seen many of those at all. What, of course, we're seeing more and more, particularly in the Caribbean, is people, cruise lines, going more and more to their private islands. We're seeing a lot of investment in private islands. So Half Moon Key is being split into two. Holland America is going to have a part. Carnival, who used to call on Half Moon Key, but they're building their own part. They're, of course, opening Celebration Key, I think it's called. So there's much more investment in those. So I haven't seen those, but we are seeing, for example, in the UK, they do these sort of short weekend ones where they'll go to Zeebrugge, for example, which is kind of industrial port. It's, you can go to Bruges, where it's not particularly interesting in reality. Bruges, I guess a lot of people like Bruges in a way, but there's some of those, but I haven't seen any specific where they don't go anywhere. Now, in some places, that's a challenge because many countries require you to call on a port. So you can't, for example, sail to the US and kind of just go back to a US port. You have to go to a foreign country to come back. So they wouldn't be able to do cruises to nowhere. So you couldn't do a New York to New York, not go anywhere, because that isn't allowed anymore. And it's quite a few countries around the world that are the same, like that. So Australia is the same, for example. Mike, Michelle, how is the weather in Japan? We're leaving on, so it's pretty cold at the moment. It's pretty much like, so the weather in Japan is very similar to the weather in London. It was pretty chilly. It was bright and sunny, which was great, but a little bit chilly. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if you're in Fahrenheit or Celsius, but we're talking about 10, 11 degrees, in Fahrenheit. So what's that, about 40, 50, or something like that. But obviously it starts to warm up more and more. So make sure you're wrapped in layers. I actually ended my cruise because it was quite cold in Japan. I was in Japan for a while before. It was really cold in China and really cold in Busan. And although I'd taken layers, I didn't take enough, and actually ended up leaving the cruise with a cold for a couple of days. Let's have a look. Summer asking the question, if you're on a 10-day Great Barrier Reef cruise with Celebrity from Sydney, are the excursions good, or would you recommend New Zealand instead? So I don't know the exact port you're calling on, but certainly I've done an itinerary. We've gone to like Brisbane, and we've gone to Cairns and Darwin and stuff like that. And there are some really fun things to do around there. So I've found some pretty interesting stuff, and I've found the New Zealand ones pretty interesting as well. So I think you probably find they are pretty good stuff, depending on which ports that you're going to. Deanna, we're on a Japan cruise with an overnight in Osaka. What must-see excursions do you recommend, or is anything to do within walking distance of the port? So absolutely, if you're in Osaka, you must 100% go to Kyoto. It's an all-day trip. You're talking about an 8-hour trip. It's about an hour and something to get there, an hour and something to go back. But you absolutely must go to Kyoto. Make sure, of course, your tour includes the Golden Temple, Golden Pavilion, sorry, and the castle, which is great. And I've got the other one with the squeaky floorboard. So I would definitely go. They'll include those in Kyoto. In terms of walking distance at the port, there is a sort of a mall kind of thing, with a Ferris wheel, stuff like that. I don't remember anything else within walking distance. So if you've got time in Osaka, you can do the Osaka Castle, which is great. These big walled and moat and stuff. That's really interesting. We also went up, I can't remember the name of the building, that you can go right up the top of a building in Osaka, really good 360 view, but the castle is fantastic to go to. That would be the thing. So Brian asked a question, if I see you on a cruise, absolutely. One of the things that I always encourage people to do is to always say hello to me. What I found sometimes is people, or someone's on disembarkation day, will say, oh, hello, we watch you, or whatever. We didn't want to interrupt you. Absolutely interrupt me. On Symphony, it was great. Loads and loads of people watch. So yes, I really like meeting people. So please do please come and say hello. I really, really like that. Seinfeld Matchen. Recently, a vlogger felt discontent as Atlas couldn't do Zodiac landings in Antarctica, probably due to lack of permission. Is it common or specific to that particular land? So those of you who haven't seen the video, it's been doing the rounds a lot. I can't remember the name of the channel that did it now, but there was a couple that covered. They went on an Atlas cruise to Antarctica. They were supposed to go through the peninsula up to South Georgia and then on to the Falklands and back to Shire. When they got on board, they were told they were doing the opposite direction. And then by the time they headed down to the peninsula, they were told they weren't even heading to the peninsula at all because of weather and stuff. And then there was almost like a revolt, and they eventually agreed to sort of head down there. They basically said, oh, it's too rough to get the Zodiacs out, although there was other ships nearby. I think it was a Quark ship that were actually tendering people and doing Zodiac things. So a couple of things with Atlas. It's worth watching the video. Atlas is very interesting. People ask me a lot about Atlas, but a couple of things to note about Atlas. They had 2 ships in service. They have taken one of them out of service in that they are now chartering it to Quark, and one of Quark's getting onto one of their ships, which I can't remember who's going to now. Windstar, I think. So also Atlas did have 2 new builds planned, but they have basically been taken over by Windstar. So so Atlas, I would based on that experience, and proceed with caution. I would say if you're looking at an Atlas cruise, I think it's hard to say. I mean, definitely, yeah, if you've ever watched, I have an Arctic video out recently talking about nothing is guaranteed when you go to Antarctica. It's entirely weather, ice dependent, but it did seem there was more. Watching the video, it did seem there was more going on there, and you're absolutely right. You do have to sort of, the expedition leaders have to sort of reserve slots, because you're only allowed 200 people in total at a landing, 100 at a time, and some landings you're only allowed 200 people per day. So you do have to sort of book some of those things. But in reality, you could still do Zodiac rise and stuff. But it feels like there was more going on, because there was 2 Atlas ships going out, and one went to the peninsula first, and they did the landing stuff. So you're right. It could be a mixture. It could be the situation, but there's something more was kind of going on. Lady Golfer, disappointed with Oceania. Yes, you've had not very happy with Oceania. And so Crystal is, I would definitely have a look at Crystal. I had a great time at Crystal. I mean, it's obviously significantly more expensive than Oceania. Actually, I suppose if you're doing more of the R-class ships, the cabins won't feel actually as small, depending on what grade you get. I mean, they obviously have massive grades. What I was very fortunate, by the way, when I was on Crystal, on Symphony, I've managed to video almost every single class of ship, because the ship wasn't full, and they actually, one of the concierge guys follows the channel, and they're YouTubers as well, him and his wife, YouTubers, and he got me to see some of the other cabins, but then they had an open day where I got to video a couple more. So I'll be able to show all of the cabins in the video that I do. But Crystal are fantastic. And certainly, Oceania talk about being the finest food at sea. I mean, Crystal is way, in another league, way more expensive, but I thought they were just fantastic. So I definitely give them a try. And the other one, of course, to try, which I haven't tried yet, is Explorer, which I do feel is going to be a big competitor for Oceania. And everyone that I know that's been on it so far has really spoken very highly about the ships, and they've really spoken highly about the food. So we will see how that goes. Barb, if you can get the luxury car and you have the budget, absolutely do it. So you're right. So in Skagway, with the train, if you do it through the cruise line, and they only seem to have the luxury car when they do link to the cruise line excursion, it's way more expensive, but it's magical. I think there's 12 seats, your big sofas. It's brilliant. It's crazy expensive, but it's magical. So I was very disappointed when I went on the Viking trip last year, because I was veranda grade, and Viking release excursions based on your grade of cabin. So by the time my grade was released, the luxury car was completely sold out. I would absolutely spend the money to go on that. I put myself on the wait list. I begged them when I got on the ship, but no joy. So it's really good fun. I mean, it's very expensive. It's like $300 and something versus like $79 or something or $80 for the regular thing, but it's just absolutely brilliant. Jacob, so I haven't really looked at the Virgin excursions, to be honest. I haven't cruised with them in the Western Caribbean, so I don't really know. But certainly any Caribbean port, there's so many options. Booking on your own, or even once you get off, taxiing, depending on what you want to do. There's loads of options. So if you should be able to see the excursions up front, but you've got, if you want to do an organized ones, you've got things like shore excursions, group, venture ashore, Viator. They have phenomenal range of excursions, often cheaper and smaller groups. So definitely have a look at that. But also when you get off the ship, you'll often find various booths and things as well. Caroline asking the question, what are your highlights of Japan? Loved Hiroshima, Nara, and Arashiyama. I loved everything about Japan. So this time I spent a lot, on my previous times I've been there, I've been to all the obvious places. So my last trip on Regent, we didn't go to Nara. So I don't know about Nara, although I think I'm going to Nara later this year. So I love Japan. I love all the places. So I love Tokyo. So I'd spent a couple of days in Tokyo before my last trip. Before I got on Crystal, I spent 4 days in Tokyo, including what I did was get on the Shinkansen, the bullet train, because I wanted to do that. Went to Nagoya and went to the Toyota Museum, which was fascinating, with the whole history of Toyota in cotton and spinning and textiles and how they evolved into cars. That was absolutely just brilliant. But I love Hiroshima and Nagasaki, obviously, for the history. I loved Osaka. We were talking about Osaka earlier, Kyoto. But what I'm really excited about is getting some places that I know less about. So I'm doing a repositioning cruise in August into September on Silversea, which calls it a couple of ports that I haven't been to. Excuse me. One thing I did actually quite like in Nagasaki, because I've been to Nagasaki twice before and I didn't want to go again to the museum, I did the slope car up the mountain, which was just phenomenal view. So every time I go back, I discover there's more and more things to see. I also love, I'm trying to remember, my mind's gone blank now. The castle, my mind's gone blank. It'll come back to me. But I loved going to kind of the different castles and things as well. Oh my goodness, it's really annoying me because it's one of the most famous castles of all. PPPJ, is it true that all private islands are 100% safe, no pickpocketing scams? Well, maybe there is, but generally, because they're basically they're self-contained, they're run by the cruise lines, so they are, you don't get the hawkers. They'll have, various areas, particularly depending which one you go to, like Labadee, for example, they have a whole massive big, vendors and hawkers and stuff. So you don't have all that kind of normal that you may have in some of the Caribbean islands. So it's pretty good. Well, you're making the good point, actually, that the included excursions on Regent is they're often set up. That's a very good point, because particularly on Regent again also releases excursions a little bit based on grade. So you're right, I have on some past Regent trips, things that I want to go on to have been sold out. But you're right, if you have no shows or cancel, so it's a little bit of lottery. You almost have to then go and say, look, I really want to go on this tour. Can I be on the wait list? Because you pretty much know that people will cancel. So it's a little bit frustrating from that perspective, because people sign up and then on the day they go, oh, I can't be bothered. So that is a challenge. What I like about Silversea too is what Silversea do is with their included excursions, the minute you book, no matter what cabin you've got, so you've got the best cabin or the entry-level cabin, the minute you book, excursions are open. So for that one I was talking about before, I was able to go in and choose my excursions for that and got all of them that I wanted. When I went on the South African one, I left it a bit late since I was locked out of some of them. So you're right, that's the problem with those. Let's have a look. Just remember, write the word question so I don't miss in your questions. William asking the question, but I did spot it. The beef bar. So the beef bar on Crystal beef bar is a concept which started in Monte Carlo. I hadn't heard of it before in reality, but then I looked on the program and it's in loads of places, including in London, all around the world. I really liked it. I mean, they have, the menu is fairly simple. It's sort of street food based, sort of steak based. They did have the option, they have the option to upgrade, if you like, where you get Kobe beef and stuff, which was like $400 and whatever. But I just stuck with the regular sirloin or whatever, and it was really delicious. They had it really nice. I think it's one of their signatures, the little bao buns, which were just fantastic. I really liked it. I only went once though, because I really liked the waterside. I liked the main restaurant. They had a massive menu. And the food was beautifully presented and stuff. So I didn't go more than once. I should have gone for lunch because they're also open for lunch, and I kept forgetting that they were open for lunch. Nicholas, thanking me for the Disney videos. Good. I'm glad that they helped. It helped you. That's good. Great to hear. Kmart. Named after the store, or the store's named after you, or pure coincidence. New to the channel, you may have covered this previously on your channel. What are your thoughts about dining with strangers on cruises, or would you prefer to dine alone? So basically, I way prefer dining alone. So one of the things I like, for example, when I was on this Crystal cruise, is there was no question around having to share tables. I would go in, and I could have a table by myself. And I like that partly because I like to be in and out. I don't want them to become a long experience because I want to go and partly with my mindset for the channel, I want to go and look at other things around the ship, and I want to go and look at some live music and video it, and go to the casino, go to the shows, go to whatever's going on around and about, and then also do some work in the evening, backup videos and stuff. So I like to dine alone. Also, I like to video my food, so it's much easier if I'm doing it by myself. And so I tend to go in early. The only time I dine with other people is if there's people that like Kelly and Carl, for example. So they follow the channel, they're patrons stuff. So we had dinner together. So often I'll dine with people that I've come to know, if you like. So I'm in the minority. Most people, though, I know love to share tables because they see there's a key part of cruising is meeting other people. Me personally, I like to dine alone. So even when I'm cruising with Mark, we will have a table for two and we will dine just the two of us. And again, we will only dine with people if we've met them or want to go and dine with them because we've come to know them, for example. Now, I know I am in the minority, so most people, a lot of people I spoke to will talk about, they will always ask to share tables because they like to do that and they like to meet lots of people. And obviously, if you're going on a cruise line that has fixed dining, fixed tables, you're with the same people every night. But most cruise lines, of course, now give you the option for anytime dining, so you can get to meet loads of people. So that's really what I prefer to do. Someone asked you to stay safe in the UK, which is quite easy to do. I get that a few comments. I guess people must think something's going on in the UK, but I'm not sure what people think is going on, but definitely will stay safe. So Chris, you mentioned the CCTV in your latest video. There's many cameras on cruises on other ships. What about the man overboard radar? So yes, all cruise ships have loads of CCTV. What Chris is referring to the video this week, I'm diving into a couple of things that I feel people don't know as much about cruise ships as they could do. So if you haven't seen that, it came out yesterday. So just go to the channel afterwards and have a look at that. Much appreciated. So yes, they are covered by CCTV everywhere. And I believe they don't have the man overboard radar system. There's very few ships, as I talk about in that video, that actually have it. Disney have it and some Carnival ships have it, and very few others seem to have it. And I think in the latest data I had, it's hard to get. There's only 30 ships have it, and there's about 300 cruise ships around. Sophia saying thank you for the content, which is great. Tom is normally on YouTube. Sorry, on Facebook is on sorry, not on Facebook. Yeah, so actually, that's good to know. I did see a bit of lagging there, so I'll have a look at that. Big Guy, what do you think of Celebrity Cruise Line? So I like Celebrity. I haven't been on Celebrity now for a while. So I didn't go on Celebrity last year. Went on a couple of times the year before. Went on the year before that. Didn't go last year. This year I'm back on. No, that's not true. I'm talking nonsense. I did a group cruise on Celebrity. What am I saying? So I did go last year. I hosted a group cruise on Celebrity. That probably tells you that I do have a good feeling about Celebrity. And I booked on Celebrity this year, doing a New York to Iceland via Canada and Greenland. So I like Celebrity. Now, the important thing, Big Guy, with Celebrity is they have three classes of ships. They have Millennium class, which are their oldest and the smallest ships. They have Solstice class, which are fairly traditional ships. They're very similar to the Holland America ships, Princess ships, that kind of ship. Then they've got the newest Edge class ships, which are very contemporary, very modern, and very different concept, both in terms of the cabin styles, the dining, for example. So like Celebrity that we were on for the group cruise, Celebrity Eclipse, I can't remember what we're on now. It has the big main dining room. Once you go to the Edge class ships, they split you. You have 4 different dining rooms with slightly different concepts that you can go to. They have Normandy, Cyprus. It's gone blank. But they have 4 different sort of concepts, so you move around those. They have Eden, although they're replacing Eden with something else on their newest ship, Excel. But they have big production shows, particularly on the Edge class ships. They are much more high tech kind of shows. So they have very different kind of concepts. So the Edge class is probably going for a younger, more contemporary, more family focused kind of audience. So when I've been on some of the, loads of families, loads of teens, that sort of stuff. Whereas the Solstice class are perhaps targeting a slightly more couples, slightly older, a little bit more staid in a way. Probably sounds negative, but not as contemporary. So they do have this kind of different concept. Millennium ships are a little bit older. They tend to do sort of slightly more exotic itineraries. So they do some of the Japans, Asias, that kind of stuff as well. So obviously the Edge class ships, because they're bigger, they'll tend to do more of the Caribbean. They'll do the big Med itineraries. You can actually do some of the Panama Canal and the new routes through those. Up in the Alaska, they do Solstice class ships mostly. They've got some Edge class ships down in Australia. So they have some very interesting itineraries. They're a great ship. They're great. They are trying to become a little bit more upmarket in a way. So their prices are creeping up. As a solo traveler, they're a little bit more hit and miss with solo travel, because in some cases their prices will be more expensive going solo than actually if you're going with two people. I got around that originally by booking when they did one of their 70% off second person. So effectively I got a solo kind of rate. So they're pretty good. Their food is pretty good. Food is probably about the same as Princess, Holland America kind of side. They're probably a little bit more contemporary than their direct competitors, which are Princess and Holland America. DB making the point, Viking has excursions. So Viking offer you one excursion, included excursion. So what happens if you go on Regent and on Silversea? So on Regent you can do as many excursions as you can pack into one day. So if you could actually do an excursion in the morning. If there's a morning excursion, if there's an afternoon excursion, you can do basically both of those. Silversea you can do one excursion a day, but they give you a choice. So you might have 4, 5, 6 depending on the port. Viking has one excursion that you can do, and it's normally just one excursion. And they tend to be, not everywhere, but certainly I found they tend to be a little bit more panoramic, a little bit more walking tour or entry into something. So for example, when we was in Alaska, we got entry into kind of sea life in Seward, stuff like that. So I found when I was on my Viking Alaska tour, I actually booked most excursions. So like the train, for example, wasn't an included excursion. So that's one of the key differences there. So the excursions probably aren't as grandiose, if that's the right word. Michelle, does a hop on off bus go to the British Museum? You certainly will have a stop that will be very handy for the British Museum. Yes, definitely. Let's have a look. Oh, Eric asked about the entertainment. So in terms of the entertainment, I would say, if we're talking about the theatre entertainment, I'll talk about live music secondly, so that's a good point. In terms of the shows themselves, they had a group of 10, so they had 4 singers and 6 dancers, although many of the singers were very accomplished dancers, so some of the singers would do the big dance routines. Overall, the shows are pretty good. I would say probably Regent is investing a little bit more in the shows. I thought Regent were pushing the shows a little bit more, sitting on grandeur. They were pretty good shows. The one thing I would say is they did lean a little bit into being dated music-wise, which disappointed me, because they still tend to think that people of my age, which are 65, which is probably sort of, most people on the ship were probably 60s, 70s in reality. They seem to think that we like Frank Sinatra and, Bobby Darin, which I have no interest in whatsoever. They're my parents' interests. My parents, they're both deceased now, but they're well into their 80s. So they seem to forget that, people of our age grew up in the 80s, the 90s, and at the push the 70s. So it's the music choices that tend to be a little bit dated. They did some interesting things with musicals where they started by choosing some unusual things. They chose Rent. They did a little thing on musicals. They did one musical which I hadn't seen, but I'd heard a lot about, which is kind of a spoof on Shakespeare and stuff, which is really fun because I hadn't seen it before. Very different, quite modern. They did some stuff from Rent, which again is kind of an oldish musical, but a little bit different. But then they went into West Side Story. It's like, okay, well, West Side Story is like not really my generation. It's my parents' generation. I know they've remade West Side Story. It's a classic and stuff. But so I felt that they were pretty slick. The dancing was very, very high energy, beautifully, like really ambitious choreography. So quite well staged. You know, they had a live band, which I really liked. They were always performing to a live band who was excellent, 7-piece live band. So, you know, the quality, the caliber was really good. I just felt it was a little bit dated. The guest artists, I again felt were a little bit dated. They had a guy who did mention the Frank Sinatra, Bobby Darin nights, like really. You know, so I you know, it was okay. I went to most of the shows. I didn't go to a lot of the guest artist stuff. They did have a guy who did like a Elton John thing, which was pretty good. So I thought it was fine, but it wasn't stand out. Room to be improved, but you know, has a lot of potential. The live music though was very good. They had, as I mentioned, they had the band, the 7-piece band, who would play. You know, they'd do the show. They'd play in the starlight for people who wanted to dancing a lot. They had a violinist who, she was amazing. They had a pianist. They had, so this is on top of the band. They had a pianist, they had a guitarist, and they had a duo who would perform. So I thought the live music choice was big. And what I liked about the guests, that live music, is the violinist lady, she would play quite contemporary music. She put a little spin on it, a little bit of classic spin on it, but she would weave in like Coldplay. She would weave in the theme from Succession. So it's contemporary kind of stuff. So I really liked that. The guitarist as well, he would play, you know, music, you know, that was kind of in the charts in the last 3 or 4 years, kind of stuff. So I really liked that. And I think people really liked it. They were always very popular listening to that. So I think the shows were fine. They just need to kind of update, be a little bit more modern. One of the things they did in the production show, they did a production show which started like, oh my God, this is soul music. The second half was disco. And I thought that was fantastic because there were songs that I kind of knew. They kind of were when I was at high school into university, you know, they pushed into the 80s. So it kind of felt a bit more of my generation, if you like. So that was good. Eric, hopefully I've answered the question. For me, Waterside was the best. I would probably put in that order. Waterside, Compass Road, Atlantide would be my ranking in reality. So let's have a look. Let's have a look. Heather, good to see you again, Heather. I book cruises. Heather's probably, a lot of you have been here doing live tours with me right back into the days, and I feel Heather was probably right there at the beginning. So let's have a look. I book cruises far in advance and then keep having to cancel because of conflicts with my kids' schedules. I'm having trouble affording cruises when I have to book and pay in full within 90 days. Help. The last minute suggestions have not helped me because our dates are always very specific. That is a real big challenge. So let me see, I assume what you're saying is the ones that I'm saying so far are very specific. I mean, I think the only thing that I feel would work is that thing around, I'm seeing a lot of flash sale stuff, particularly, as I mentioned, end of quarter, which I assume they're hitting sales targets. I feel that would probably be the best thing to work for those kind of promotions and activities. They do, though, tend to be on the more premium lines, which is not great. But Celebrity does quite a lot of them. I know you like Disney. I guess Disney is always kind of pretty sold out and pretty expensive. But that's where I would focus, I think, Heather. And I've seen them using particularly Instagram and Facebook a lot. And what I've noticed is, because I obviously interact with quite a lot of cruise content, they tend to show those up there. I mean, the other thing to do, which is quite a good source for looking, is sites like Vacations to Go. I personally don't book through Vacations to Go, but they're quite good. I use them a lot when I'm looking for itineraries. You know, if I want to go to Shanghai, I use that to search and see who's selling there when, or if I'm thinking, oh, I want to go away in June in Europe, what's going. That they may throw up those kind of things. The other thing to look for, and I don't know what the equivalent is in the US, Heather, but certainly in the UK, there are a couple of groups like RL, Cruise, Bolshova, etc. And they, I guess, are used by the cruise lines to clear stuff. So there's also one which one can actually watch every weekend in the morning. We have breakfast on the weekend, which I think is called Love It, Book It or something. And these two guys, and they basically talk about, and it's packaged stuff. So I'm guessing often, and they sell a bit further in advance, but what I see in the newspapers, like the Daily Mail in the UK stuff, is every weekend there'll be adverts with kind of these packaged things. So there'll be a hotel flight, whatever, and it's quite short notice. And I assume it's because the lines are saying, right, we've got 20 cabins we want to clear, and they give them to them to clear. I don't know what the equivalent would be in the US, but there must be, I don't know, whatever the Sunday papers are. That would be my other thought. I don't know if that helps. Let's have a look. Kim, interested in Oceania's Regatta 24-day Bali to Tahiti itinerary. Very nice itinerary. Any thoughts about this older ship's accommodation and the food services possibly slipped a bit? Well, I haven't been on the Oceania, those ships for a while. I've only been on their newer ships, the Vista and Marina, and this year, at the end of this year, we're going on Riviera again. So the key thing to note with those R-class ships is obviously the cabins are smaller, and particularly in every other cabin, unless you're in a suite, the bathrooms are very tiny. So you just need to bear that in mind. So the bathrooms are very, very small. Certainly in terms of food, I can't comment directly. I know people who've been on Oceania, we heard from someone a little bit earlier, feel that the food has slipped a bit. Now, there have been a lot of management changes. So I feel like maybe Oceania feel that things have slipped because they've made a massive, big change just this last month with their management, where they've got, rather abruptly, their president, which is Frank Del Rio's the son, Jr., disappeared as president. They chopped and changed. So I feel like they're kind of making some changes there. That, they're probably alienated people because they're changing the OLIFE program into get more, get less and stuff. So I feel like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see much more positive stuff coming from that. So that would be my thought. So anyway, we booked Oceania. We booked it's an 18 night from Sydney to Papeete, and I'm very confident that they will be good. So that hopefully should be good. Just remember, write the word question so I don't miss anything. I nearly missed that. Rashika, hopefully I pronounced it correctly. What's your thought on the Queen Anne Christmas Market cruise on the 14th of December 2025? I assume you mean that because otherwise you're going back in time. So I would say the critical thing with this, if you want to get a feel for Cunard, they're great. Bear in mind, though, that generally speaking, with those short Cunard cruises, is you don't necessarily get a particularly good Cunard experience because they tend to be pretty sharply priced. You get lots of people piling on, particularly for kind of a party. So it tends to be a bit more of a party atmosphere. So we used to take my mum and my mother-in-law on some of those, Christmas cruise kind of things. We sort of pulled away a bit from it because it got a little bit more party-like. But certainly, if you want to experience a ship, you want to get a slight flavor of Cunard, and generally it's a pretty good price. Christmas markets, I guess you're going to Bruges. I don't know if you're going to any other places. The Bruges Christmas market's quite fun. So so it's worth a try, but just bear in mind it's going to be a little bit more raucous than probably your normal, which might be appealing to you. Anthony adding some things around going on the A350 to 787 because they have cabin pressure. That's a good point on the jet lag point. The more modern ship, the more modern and recent aircraft are obviously very focused on that. So that's a good point there. Daniel, do you recommend the Panama Canal cruise of Norwegian's Encore? I always recommend a Panama Canal cruise. What's important to bear in mind is have a look at my Panama cruise video, which came out recently. And I talk about the pros and cons of the different things. The Encore will go through the new locks, which are still, fantastic to go through. I would tend to try and go, if you're only through Panama Canal once, if you can go on a ship that goes through the old locks, but if that's the right thing for you, then do it. At least get through the Panama Canal would be my thing. And obviously Encore is a pretty nice ship as well. So let's have a look. Kate asking the question, not cruise related, but Raoul, do you have any plans to do more train travel planned? I'm taking a train across Canada soon, looking forward to. I don't actually have any train stuff lined up. I would desperately like to go on a train. I have a long list of trains, but I don't have any specifically lined up. But I do need to look at that. I do have a long list. I need to try and figure out how to squeeze all those in. But that train cruise across Canada would be fantastic. I've followed a few people who've done that, various bits and pieces. So let's have a look. We're running out of time, but let's have a quick look. This is a hot topic. Chris, on Holland America Rotterdam to Iceland in 2026, how do you see the port fee issue evolving? Fine print says the line can change ports of call. As a lawyer, I wonder if legal in case value cruise suffers. So Chris, you're absolutely right. All cruise contracts say that the cruise line can change the itinerary before or during, and you have no chance of compensation. It's very clear in the cruise contract, and that is absolutely the case. So some people do try and argue the point to try and cancel or get a refund by arguing significant. Some of the cruise contracts do talk about significant changes to give you the option, but generally speaking, if they're shuffling ports around, you're accepting when you buy the cruise contract. So that's the case. Now, for those who don't know what's happened, Iceland have introduced a fee. Is it 15 euros? Don't quote me on the exact price, but it's unlike some places, it's per port. So if you're going to 4 ports in Iceland, you have to pay it 4 times. So I think we will see, we've already seen some cruise lines talk about reducing calls into Iceland, or particularly if they're doing a combo, calling into fewer ports in Iceland. So I think we will see, either because there's such demand, people want to go to some of those ports. I suspect we will see the fares just ease upwards to cover that. But I think some cruise lines, particularly with more value conscious, so MSC, for example, where price is a massive big draw for MSC, they have said they are going to be cutting back in ports. I think because the 2026 is kind of locked in, my personal, I have no data on this, I'm just saying what I think. Because 2026 is locked in, I think you may see, they'll might increase port fees and stuff like that. I think heading out, we may see Iceland being kind of adjusted a little bit. But certainly, it's definitely one to do. A point is, it's definitely one to watch and see what people are doing. I have only seen so far, and I'm correct if I'm wrong, if people have seen elsewhere, I've only seen MSC specifically talking about reducing ports. Other cruise lines have said they will review and monitor it. So we will see. Here's a good question from Mooman547. For those of you who follow me or don't follow me, those who do follow me on Instagram or a patron or channel member will know that I, on Symphony, won just over $700, over $800 on, what was that? I was $700, no, I was roughly $700 up. So I decided to cash out. I did spend another $100. So I came back, I think I was around about $600 up when I left. So I didn't go back. Now the advantage was, because the casino was actually very quiet and it wasn't open many nights, because Japan has very strict rules, China has very strict rules around when it could open. So actually the casino wasn't open very often, couldn't open very often. So that wasn't drawing. So it didn't have any of the machines that I really, really like. So even though I did really well, I wasn't, if they have certain machines that I love playing slots on, which are the Zeus machines, and in Vegas, the Wonder Woman machines. So if those machines are there, I probably would have gone back more. But I did come back $600 up, so that was fantastic. Right, so we have churned through time, and so there's many other questions that I need to that I haven't got to. But the good news is I will be back next week with a live, same time, same place. I will have a look at these questions and see if I can actually get any more of these answered in any other way. But thanks so much for joining. So I'll hopefully see you next week. Remember, that's that video that's out that I mentioned earlier. Take a look at that, and have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks, everybody.